complainer. Um, okay. Well, it's an honor for me to be here to tell you a little bit about my journey in life. It's really a great honor. I'm not used to speaking in front of a group like this, so y'all please bear with me. I want to start with Bismillah, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Um, for those, you obviously don't know me, but I'm an American from Mississippi, which is probably about 1,400 miles east of here, and I am a cotton breeder to develop cotton varieties for U.S. cotton growers. And I had a trip here to the Phoenix area to evaluate some cotton for heat tolerance, and of course it's a hot place. And I arranged my trip without really realizing that my travel day was on the Id, and it so happens that my plane was to leave at 6:19 from Memphis, and then I arrived here at 7:30. So I had time to make it for the Id. So Allah made a way for me to celebrate Eid here in Phoenix, Arizona, without even planning it. So alhamdulillah for that. And I'm here today as a result of invitation from Brother Hussein. Wanted me to share my journey to Islam. So just a little introduction about who I am and where I come from and everything. But I also wanted to begin by quoting a few ayah, similar to what the brother quoted earlier. And Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, A'udhu min shaitan rajim. I have only created jinn and men that they may serve or to worship me. And that's Surah 51, Ayah 56. And I say that in mind that me as a convert, sometimes I am held up as, okay, that, and they see me as something special, but all guidance comes from Allah, and to Him belongs the praise. So if you see any good in my story, say Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, and don't praise me. And if you see any error or you see any deviation, then you can blame me for my frailty as a human and my inadequacy. And want to read another ayah. We made the Quran a light, guiding thereby whom we please of our servants, and most surely you show the way to the right path. And that is very much applicable to my story. How I came to Islam. I came to Islam through a student at Mississippi State University. He was an Iranian. This was at the time immediately after the hostage crisis that all Americans are aware of in 1979 after the revolution. And I was going to college during that time. And one of the things I heard more than one time was that that we should nuke Iran until they glow and then shoot them in the dark. I mean, such was the hatred toward the Iranians for taking the American hostages. Well, it was right after they were released that I was in a dormitory room at Mississippi State University, and I was in a dormitory room with 2 beds, but I didn't have a roommate. And I had a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and outside there was this Iranian student, and he said, okay, I am looking for someone who will accept me as a roommate, because I've asked several people, and they don't want me to be the roommate because I'm from Iran. And he asked if he could be my roommate, and I said he could. And that was in January 1981. I was a Christian then, and he and my roommate, his name was Mahmoud Masood Mirsabri. It's pretty good that I can remember that after so many years. Um, he and I would occasionally discuss religion, but not in very much detail. And then over Christmas break, which was basically a year later, I took his Quran home because I wanted to see what he believed, because it was different from what I believed as a Christian. And this Quran was a Yusuf Ali translation, and it had a very good index. So it had an index where you can look up any subject and you find all the different ayahs about it. So I read all the ayahs about Prophet Jesus and Mary. And at first I disbelieved because it was different from what I believed as a Christian. But then after a time, I kept reading for some reason. I guess I'm a curious person. And it was like a light switch that said, wait a minute, what the Quran says makes more sense than what I believe as a Christian. That God, before I saw that Jesus and God were one and the same. And after reading the Quran, I saw that Jesus was a prophet, a creation of God, and that God was separate. And after that, they haven't come back together since. I mean, I saw them as separate. And the same with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Imam Ali, that they are not God, that they are creations of Allah. They emanate as light from Allah, but they are not Allah. Allah is unique and distinct. So that's how I came to become a Muslim. And I learned how to pray, and I practiced for a while. But then I graduated, and I went to graduate school in Indiana at Purdue University. And I went to the masjid there, and I tried to go to the masjid, but I didn't feel that I fit in because they spoke in Arabic a lot and they dressed funny, and I just didn't feel welcome. So I stopped practicing Islam. I graduated from Purdue University, and Allah willed that I should come back to the same place where I left. I got a job with the U.S. Department of Agriculture at Starkville, Mississippi, where Mississippi State University is. And I was back to the people where I knew after I became a Muslim, and they welcomed me back. And I started practicing again. That was in January of 1985. And then after a short time, I got discouraged. This was in November of 1985 that I quit practicing Islam again. And there were three main reasons. One of which was I couldn't find a Muslim wife. And I was young. I was 25 years old, and young people need a spouse at that time. So I couldn't find a wife, and I had opposition from my family, a lot of conflict. And the third thing is that the media and people around me generally associated Muslims with terrorism, with suicide bombings in Israel and things like that. And that was not something that I agreed with, because I'm not a violent person. I'm a peaceful person. And so those three reasons I stopped practicing Islam. And then I married a Christian. And that was in 1985, 1986. Well, I started back to school, and I got my PhD, and I got a job. And over time, I would again start to try to practice Islam, because I still had it in my heart. And I tried to practice Islam again, establish my prayer, and do the fasting. And I would do okay for a short time, and I would try to find a mosque and try to practice my life as a Muslim, and I kept failing. And then in 2001, June of 2001, this was shortly after I turned 40 years old. So it's something about turning 40 years old that is like a maturity thing. And at that point, I realized truly that I will die one day, and that I would stand before Allah. And I remember thinking that I could not use the excuse that some Muslim blew himself up in the name of Islam as the reason why I did not pray. And I decided that I would practice Islam regardless of what anybody else did in the name of Islam, that I would practice it the best I could, because I had to stand before Allah and give account for my life. So that was in June of 2001. And then, lo and behold, shortly after that was 9/11, which was a really big test for me. But Allah willed that I should continue my course, and I have stayed and I have practiced Islam since 2001, mashallah, as Allah has willed. I came back there in Mississippi. There's not very many Muslims, and where I live, there was not even a mosque. I got in touch with an Egyptian doctor who had been leading prayer, but he had stopped. But he told me about a small group that was trying to establish a mosque in that area. So I joined that group, and I joined that group, and we established a local mosque. And that was a Sunni group, of course, and actually quite a few of them were Salafi. So that was my influence, and I practiced as that basically because that was the Muslims around me. And then along about 2014 or something like that, I became more interested in developing a more spiritual aspect of my life, because my practice of Islam was very, very much ritualistic. And as a Christian, I didn't have a problem with Christianity. I felt like I was a sincere Christian, and I had a spiritual experience with Christianity that I found was lacking within Islam, at least my practice of Islam. And I started exploring Sufism. And I listened to quite a few lectures by Hamza Yusuf. Some of those lectures include Purification of the Heart, or Refinement of the Hearts. Those were lectures based off of books by Ghazali. And I really enjoyed that because it talked about how to change yourself on the inside, and how you can be a better person to people, and how you can become, in a way, more like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Muhammad Ali were in their life. So I did, and I started on that route. But there was a lingering question in my mind, and Allah knows where it came from. It obviously came from Him, but there was a conflict in my mind about the conflict between Imam Ali and Muawiyah, because I saw that it was strange that Muslims would fight against each other, and this was right after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam died. And when I would ask a Sunni imams, or ask any Sunni about that, they always avoided the question. They would give me some answer. Okay, well, that's a long time ago. Let's don't worry about that. Let's focus on today. I mean, they were all companions. Maybe they made mistakes. Maybe they didn't. So I couldn't get any answers from the Sunni, and so what I did is I researched on my own, and I ordered a couple of books. One of those books was Destiny Disrupted. It was a pretty good book about early Islamic history. And another one was After the Prophet. And that was a story about, it was a book about the Sunni-Shia split. So those books started giving me some understanding about the differences between Sunni and Shia. I mean, that was one of the things. Let me back up a little bit. That when I converted to Islam, I converted basically on reading the Quran, and I started practicing it. But at the time, I really did not know Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam very well. And then after I started practicing Islam again in 2001, I read a book, The Sealed Nectar, which was a Sunni book about the biography of Prophet Muhammad. So I finally learned who the prophet was and the struggles that he went through in order to spread Islam and to abolish idolatry. And at that point, I really started to love Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And before that, I didn't even really know who he was, other than he was the prophet of Islam. And I say that in that before my journey into the Shia view of history, I didn't really know who Imam Ali was, alayhi wasalam. So it's the kind of thing that you can't really love someone if you don't know who they are. And over time, I have read several books about Imam Ali. I've read about history, so I feel like I have a pretty good understanding. Of course, I've also read about how in someone asked to describe Imam Ali, and it's okay, how can you describe Ali? I mean, because he has such attributes that it's almost indescribable. Um, but the thing is that I read those books, and I started to understand history. And then I had a Facebook friend who sent me an article about Fadak. And I read that article, and I read how Fatima Zahra had died angry at Abu Bakr and Omar. And that was because of the issue of Fadak, and also because they seized the authority from Imam Ali. So those things together, that the daughter of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam died angry at these two men. And Allah puts the love of people in people's hearts. I mean, it's not something that I will to have, but there was something in my heart that when I read that one article, I immediately turned against Abu Bakr and Omar, and I started going toward the Shia way and trying to learn how to practice as a Shia, and that sort of started the ball rolling about me becoming a Shia. And after that, I also read quite a few books on the details of the history, and those books were mostly by Muhammad Tijani. They were very good books. One of them was Then I Was Guided. It talked about his personal story about coming from Sunni to Shia, and also a book, Black Thursday, and also The Shia Are the True Followers of the Sunnah. And I read other books as well, and I feel like I have a pretty comprehensive view of early Islamic history, and I wholeheartedly believe, without any shadow of doubt, that Imam Ali alayhi wasalam was designated by Allah and by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be his successor, and that Abu Bakr Omar stole that authority from him, and the Ummah was led astray from that moment. And it really brings tears to my eyes to know that the injustice, that the actions those few people had, even today, that we have Muslims fighting each other even today because of that. And it traces all back to those two people. So that's basically how I became a Muslim, and it's also how I came to the Shia view. And I can't think of anything else to add, so I'll be glad to answer any questions if anybody has any. Yeah.
Guess my question is, what verse specifically, since you said you kind of looked into the Jesus and Mary verses, and that kind of lit up a light bulb to what made you kind of convert. Is there any specific verse you would say that kind of got you like intrigued in it or sparked your light?
No, that was, how many years ago? That was 1981, and this is 2021. That was 40 years ago.
Fair enough. Yeah.
No, I can't. There wasn't any single verse. It was just all of them together. And again, it was a matter of, at first I disbelieved because it was different. I mean, a lot of people say that they always had a problem with the Trinity, and but I didn't necessarily understand the Trinity, but I didn't question it. I accepted it on faith. And then in reading the Quran, I disbelieved at first, as I said, but I kept reading, and Allah changed my heart. He's a turner of hearts. And He turned my heart over a matter of Christmas break in 1981. The similar way He turned my heart, and after reading that single article about Fadak. But I don't remember any specific ayahs.
Fair enough. Any other questions?
I am so happy for being here and give my kids here opportunity or the chance to see you and meet you. When I came here, it's to me it was like a big problem to how to teach my kids. I know a lot of information, but in my language, in Arabic, my kids speaks mostly English. But try to teach them that Imam Ali said, all the people are your brothers, either in humanity or in the faith. So teach them, look at the people, all people is your brother. Don't think you are different. But here the question, does it matter to be Muslims or Shia? Does it matter to be Muslim or Shia? Why it's important to be Muslims? For them, I want them to realize, to understand, why they should learn about their religion, why they should learn about Imam Ali, and what the benefit from that.
Well, to me, we're on this earth only for a very short time. All of you are young. I was young once. I'm probably among the oldest in the room. I am 60 years old, so I am getting closer and closer to my death. And as I die, as I mentioned earlier, that I realize that I will face Allah in Judgment Day one day. And I believe in my heart that Islam is the proper way to live our life, and it is the best way to live because that's how Allah wanted us to live. And I believe that Islam is a continuation of what Prophet Abraham taught, what Moses taught, what Jesus taught. I don't see any difference. I see the life of Imam Hussein, and I see the life of Jesus, and I don't see difference there. I see that they were humble people, but they were in complete submission to God. In the Bible, Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane before he was to be crucified, and he prayed to God the Father. It says, "Okay, not my will, but your will be done." And that's the same with what Imam Hussein. I mean, he could have saved his own life. He could have said, "Okay, well, yeah, I'll give allegiance to Yazid, and I'll go back and I will live my life." But no, he submitted to the will of Allah. He said, "Okay, well, instead of submitting and paying allegiance to Yazid, I am here to stand to restore the religion of my grandfather, which was Prophet Muhammad." Because Islam had deviated so much under Yazid, it was almost like it was just Islam in appearances. It wasn't in the heart. And Islam is about your relationship. And you see, that's another thing between Islam and Christianity. The teachings of Jesus are very similar to the teachings of Islam. And then Jesus taught, when he was asked about the greatest commandment, the greatest commandment is to love God with all of your heart. And the second commandment was to love your neighbor as yourself. And to me, I see that captures the essence of Islam as well. That first you submit to Allah, and like you were saying earlier, that yes, everyone else is our brothers in humanity, or our brothers in faith. You're my brothers in faith. Even I drive by people in the street, I see people are homeless, and my heart breaks. And I see the same with, I am the only Muslim in my family. There is no other Muslim that I know of that has the last name of McPherson. I am the only one. And for that I am thankful, but at the same time I am sad. Because, of course, one can't help but love their family. And to know that they don't have what I have in Islam is sad. And Islam is a precious pearl. And this life, the life of this dunya, has a lot of glitter. I mean, people drive around with fancy cars, they fancy clothes, and you say, okay, well, I like that. But all of these things will pass away. And what matters is what's in your heart and your faith. So,
Assalamu alaikum.
like Islam.
I don't want to step on my bounds, but the question you asked earlier about why is it important to be Shi'i, there was one particular thing I can think of in the sermon of recognition where Imam Ali alayhi salam says, لا ينفع الأعمال إلا بولايتي ولا ينفع الحسنات إلا بحبي. The acts are of no use without my walaya, my leadership, and the good deeds are of no use without loving me.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, this is something I just came up with. I don't know if it's actually a quote, but not loving or following Rasulullah is kufr, disbelief. But not loving and following Amir al-Mu'mineen is hypocrisy. And denying his walaya is pretty much denying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance on earth. And even in the Bible, in Genesis 17 verse 20, it actually says that God promised 12 princes from the line of Ishmael. And surely Prophet Muhammad is from the line of Ishmael. And he fulfilled his promises.
Yep.
And Allah
Except from your brothers, yeah.
and even the word imam is mentioned 12 times in the Quran. Subhanallah, the Aziz al-Hakim. But I actually have a question myself. What did the battle between Aisha and Imam Ali alayhi salam, known as the Battle of Jamal or the Battle of Camel, have any effect on you? Because you said the battle between Muawiyah and Imam Ali, known as the Battle of Siffin, but the Battle of Jamal, which preceded it, was perhaps even more controversial than the battle between Muawiyah. But I don't know if if you ever came.
Well, the thing is that that battle is kept better hidden than the battle between Ali and Muawiyah. I didn't know anything about that.
It's really.
I mean, the Sermon of Qadir. I was completely unaware of that. The book that I told you about, that the Sealed Nectar, it's a thick book about the life of Prophet Muhammad. Qadir Qum was not mentioned once. Not even a single word about it. So it's the kind of thing is that, okay, the Battle of the Jamal, yes, that without that, most likely, well, Allah knows, but Imam Ali likely could have defeated Muawiyah, and instead of being diverted to fight this battle, by the time he was fighting Muawiyah, the people were getting tired of fighting, particularly Muslims against Muslims, and then when you had the Khawarij revolt then, and I believe that without Jamal, that if the attention would have been focused on Muawiyah, he would have been defeated. So yes, that was a very important battle. And also you see the fact that Aisha was really the leader of that battle, and who her father was Abu Bakr. It reinforces that very point, okay, that Abu Bakr was wrong in seizing the authority of the caliphate. And it was not for any other than selfish means. But yet the Sunni are such that they can't see that.
It's really interesting because it's really in their own books, because I actually picked up a lot of Sunni books and I actually read it myself, like Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, and that event of Ghadir Khum, when Rasulullah says, "Inni tarakum fikum athaqalain kitab Allah wa thrithi ahli bayti," it's in Sahih Muslim, and he repeats "Adhakirkum Allah fi ahli bayti" 3 times, and they take that part out every single time, and they say إني تارك فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وسنتي at their speeches. But that's besides the point. But with the Aisha thing, there's actually, even in Musnad Ahmad is one of their books, chapter 66 of the Quran, Surah Al-Tahrim, is actually that whole surah is dedicated to basically an altercation between her and Hafsa, which is where they talked behind the back of Rasulullah, and even in their own books they attribute that to her. And that's like another thing. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you talk to them, because like there's some verses that I've brought up to like a Sunni scholar, and they just don't want to talk about it. I don't know if you've had that like experience.
No, I haven't really had many conversations with Sunni. I post things on Facebook, and my Sunni friends pretty much have gone away. So they don't like to admit those kind of things. So I haven't really had the conflict discussing that. But the point that you're saying about walaya, that is a very important point that you said. And actually, I read a book about Shia spirituality by Rebecca Masterton, and she does say how important the concept of walaya and walaya are essential in Islam, as you said.
So yeah, what is the thing you find missing and hope Islamic centers could provide for Muslim convert community?
That's a good question, because I live 3 hours away from the nearest masjid, and I hardly get a chance to visit it. But I live near Greenville, Mississippi, and the closest masjid is at Memphis, and I go there once a month at best. So I don't really have a good answer for you yet. I mean, that is a very welcoming place. They give the khutbahs in English, so I can understand, and they're very warm and receptive to me. So my experience has been good, and I don't have anything that I can add really.
I got a question right here. I guess this is like a general question for us. Is, as someone who converted into Islam, and then from from Sunni to Shia, so you kind of experienced it all, saw all directions. What is one piece of advice you would give to us as just Shia Muslims that you would say that you would, from your life to us, as maybe to better ourselves or kind of reflect on ourselves? One piece of advice in your life.
I would say to study the life of Imam Ali and Prophet Muhammad and the other Imams as best you can, and to try to pattern your life again after them. To me, that's probably the best thing, because particularly living in the West, you're drawn away from that way of living. Imam Ali alayhi Islam was a very humble person. He was very detached from this world. I mean, he didn't wear fancy clothes, and he always thought of helping the others. He would give in charity. He would stay up at night taking charity to people who need it. And those are the kind of things that we need to instill into our lives.
Thank you. Do any of the kids in that front have any questions? No? Mustafa?
Brother, first, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. I had a question about, you had talked a little bit about looking a little deeper into spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
How has that changed your practice?
That is a really good question. One of the things that we have in Shia Islam is the du'as that are left by the different imams, particularly the book by Ali Zain al-Abidin. That book of du'as is it has such depth in it, there's such breadth in them, that there's when you really read those and you think about them and you can apply those to your life, that is a spirituality that's lacking in the Shia way. And then, like I was saying earlier, trying to incorporate how they live their lives into your own life is to me the spirituality. And the spirituality is, and I'm by no means an expert, but to me it's a detachment from this world, and it's a realization of our ultimate goal in life is to live as Allah has intended us to, and to worship Him. It was really a good question, which I don't have a really good answer for, but that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you, and I have a follow-up question, if that's okay. How do you view yourself now as a Muslim, and how do you interact with people? What's different now that you're a practicing Muslim?
How do I try to be tolerant of others, and I try not to be judgmental, while at the same time it's okay. The different lifestyles that are common these days, you could say, okay, well, I don't agree with that lifestyle. Sometimes things are against our religion, and it's one thing to say, okay, well, these people have the right to make their own decisions in their life, and I can't really force them to change it. That's one of the things about Islam is enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. But at the same time, you have to live in the society that you're in. Either that or you leave it. And the thing that I try to do is try to be an example of kind treatment to others, and try to be respectful to others. So.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Well, thank you all for your attention and your questions.
Sorry for bombarding you with questions. Thank you so much. But if someone, like, let's say a Christian or a Sunni, and you're not necessarily trying to convert them, but like, what would, like, if you were trying to give them some advice, just to like, not convert them, but just nudge them to guidance, you know what I mean? Like, not necessarily like force anything on them, just like what was the thing that made you change? What could you say to someone who wants to look for the truth, or is still kind of looking and was in the same spot you were, you know, several like years ago when you were looking? Like, what would you say to them?
Well, I guess my experiences in interacting with people is that soon after 2001, when I started practicing Islam again, I did talk to people and I tried to convert them to Islam. And I would have to say that I did not succeed a single time. And I don't know what I could have done differently, if anything, that made a difference to any of these people, including my own family. But as far as sharing with them, okay, that, for example, Christianity, I do see a lot of similarity even between Christianity and Shia Islam, but there is differences. I mean, because we revere Imam Ali, alayhi Islam, very highly, but not to the status of being equal with God. But yet we love Imam Ali because of our knowledge of him and his life, and the respect and honor that God gave him as being the successor to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So trying to share some of the similarities, but at the same time say, okay, that God in his essence is one, and that he is not joined as a partner with anyone, and that Islam is very similar to Christianity in many respects, particularly with regards to what Jesus recorded to have said in the New Testament, particularly the four Gospels. So you can show the similarities, but at the same time, even in the Bible, you can say, okay, like Acts 3:13, it talks about Jesus as the servant of God. And you can bring those things to attention. If someone is open to it, well, they can start to think on their own, and then they will study deeper. Faith does not come from the outside in. It comes from the inside going out. So you can plant a seed, and that seed sometimes must be very small, because if the seed is too big, it won't go in the heart.
That's a good analogy for it. So like, kind of like a follow-up question is, what you're saying is that basically, you know how you said, you were comparing like, Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, in comparison to like Imam Ali, how like we both revere them highly. So like, if you were like Christian back then, and are you basically saying if someone revealed Imam Ali to you and kind of explained his qualities, would that have made? Is that what you're saying, or like,
Yeah.
with that
Well,
earlier thing you said?
Well, I tell you what, on this trip here to Arizona, I had a person down in Maricopa that was helping me record data. And I found out that he is very interested in history and in World War II battles. And I shared with him how Imam Ali fought at the Battle of Khyber, and how he was opposed to the two top warriors, and he slew them, and then he tore the gate off of the fortress. So trying to touch people where they're coming from, give them something that they can relate to in their own life, it might make a difference. But guidance only comes from Allah.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of like I don't want to praise Imam Ali too highly, because I'm afraid that if I praise him too much, people think I'm worshiping him, but I'm not. It's just like, if you taste from the fountain of the Ahlul Bayt, then you'll see for yourself. It's just, you end up falling in love with them so much because of their intense valor. Even like, there's like a Christian named George Jordak, and he actually wrote a book about Imam Ali. He called it Imam Ali, the Voice of Human Justice. And it's just, I don't know, when you see Imam Ali, it just creates an intense like attraction towards like his values.
So I have a quick question. You say that you practice Sufism like in part of your life. So what do you find between like Sufism and Shiism spirituality? Like like between those two, like what is difference?
Well, I find similarity in like I was saying, the purification of the heart, and also the self-examination and trying to change yourself to where you're humble. I see similarity there, and also in the dhikr, and that is very similar. But the main difference is what the brother said earlier about walaya, is that they still believe that Abu Bakr and Omar were rightful successors, and they don't accept the concept of walaya, the authority of Al-Bayt. And without that, I mean, it's like a house built on sinking sand. You don't have solid rock under you. And without the walaya as your foundation, anything built on it is worthless. Okay. Well, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. It's all for the sake of Allah. Okay, well, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.